I think that Daniel Ricciardo should have been given the second Red Bull seat.
I feel like this might be something that we have to talk about on this podcast pretty often, right? Liam Lawson struggling in the second Red Bull seat. I hope that's not the case, but we already talked about it last. The expectations, and I said, if I'm not mistaken, that he's not gonna have it easy. He's not gonna have it easy with all the pressure, confidence, breaking apart, maybe. But I also feel like that the Red Bull just must be so goddamn difficult to drive. Obviously, Albon has been saying this. Everybody has been saying this. That the car is so pointy, and one can just assume that since those days when Albon was in the car, they have only tailored it to Max more. And especially, I feel like last year, once the performance started falling off a little bit, they couldn't really afford to spend as much effort on trying to make the car as so suited for Checo. Especially for 2025. Yeah. I'm pretty sure, they knew their pace just isn't where it used to be. Still decent. But in that case, I mean, when you're Red Bull, are you going to put your money on just, okay, let's make it as fast as possible for Max, and so that he can do his magic with it? Yes, Lawson might suffer, but, Max is going to bring in the points. Or are you going to be like, okay, let's make it fair and square? I think it's kind of an obvious choice, right? Because, like, Verstappen is the one who has been dominating, or was dominating for a couple of years. He's, an amazing driver. So you're gonna put your money on him. You're gonna develop the cars for him, which obviously then is gonna hurt Lawson. But I feel like then Helmut Marko can't be, can be mad at him. Like, you built the car this way. Obviously, also with more factors, right? But still, I feel like it's, it's not his fault, but I feel like it was bound to happen. I don't know if Yuki would be doing better.
That's actually a good question.
Could we see that? Could we see a swap in a couple of races? I mean, it's in Red Bull, in true Red Bull fashion. I wouldn't be surprised, but still.
Yeah. I mean, how bizarre. Like, it's, yeah, although, you clearly Red Bull is going for the option of having a very well stated number one driver. And who can fault them? If your driver is Max Verstappen, you're not going to likely just have equal treatment between drivers unless you have a certain Alonso, Hamilton, or maybe Leclerc alongside him, But Red Bull is clearly not really interested in this philosophy. And, it is quite funny because I don't recall a podcast where we wouldn't talk about the second seat of the Red Bull,
I wanted to say, last year, I don't even want to say how many episodes we spent shitting on Checo. I feel like in this latter part of the season, it was almost every other podcast that we would talk about this. Because he was struggling. I mean, in Baku, he was going for the win, but then the fateful collision with Sainz happened, which also took away Ferrari's Constructors Championship.
True.
Anyway, I got a bit lost in my memories there. But yeah, the second, I mean, I feel like, had we started the podcast years earlier, we would have been talking about Gasly
and Albon.
Yeah,
that is very true. That is very true. And it seems like the running problem of all of them, too pointy front end, lack of confidence, in the high-speed corners. Because I was just looking at the onboards of, Verstappen on his qualifying lap in Q1 and Lawson in his, qualifying lap in Q1 because he didn't get further. But, it just seemed like in the high-speed corners, for example, when just Verstappen was able to kind of chuck in the car. But yeah, Lawson just didn't trust the car. And, don't get me wrong. Maybe this is an unpopular opinion. You can feel free to discuss with me, but I think that Daniel Ricciardo should have been given the second Red Bull seat. And don't get me wrong, it's because he has a proven record of, the Red Bull characteristics. suiting his driving style and being able to actually cope with the car more or less on par with Verstappen, or at least 100% better than anybody who did after. And, Lawson, as good as he is, because he actually won on his debut in the Super Formula. It's only his second Grand Prix weekend, so I would find it pretty harsh to just swap him. Because, for example, Perez, he got multiple seasons despite not being really on top of his performance. But on the contrary, he never really finished last in qualifying, did he? And 2 times in a row. But, mainly Suzuka is coming up. And Lawson is very good at Suzuka, actually. I don't think he has really driven in Australia and in China before. So I think that Japan, Suzuka could be the breaking point for Lawson, because that is actually a track he drove an F1 car on.
Yeah.
So maybe that is where he rebuilds his confidence. But yeah, many sources say that he's going to be replaced by Tsunoda on the Japanese Grand Prix. Some say that Franco Colapinto would be given, would be just borrowed on loan and be signed to VCarb. So what is going on?
Franco Colapinto, the star of last year's second half, right? But I think it could be a matter of time before he gets a seat somewhere. Mid-season. But you raised a couple of good points. I feel like, Suzuka will be a breaking point for Lawson in one way or the other.
Go big or go home.
Go big or go home, because either he's going to prove to everyone, okay, it was the 2 unlucky weekends, okay, that can happen to anyone. But now I'm here. I'm in fucking Q2 at least,
Woohoo.
Q1, if the gods will it. And then he can, at least show some pace during the race day and everything. Or it's gonna be the same case as the weekends right now, and he's on the way to being kicked out probably. I do think that it would be insane. It would be insane to replace him right now. I get that Suzuka would be a cool place to promote Yuki to the Red Bull seat. But you can't do that after 2 races.
Yeah.
That would be, even if you're Helmut Marko, even if that's your style, 2 races would be chilling crazy. I mean, for Lawson, his career would then be in 20 years a very, very interesting trivia question.
Yeah. 13 races.
But going back to what you said about Daniel Ricciardo, I also think that's really interesting, because I've seen this sentiment online, that people saying, okay, well, they forgot the one driver who could drive with a pointy end. And, I don't know, man. I don't know. Because obviously, we all remember, or at least know, of what Daniel Ricciardo was capable in those days of 2018 and before.
Yeah, exactly.
But then it's been so long. It's been I'm not, I don't think that right now, if Daniel Ricciardo was in that Red Bull, that he would be performing like crazy, that he would be up there.
Yeah,
I think he was without a doubt a good driver, and don't get me wrong, I would love to see how he would perform, but I don't think that he would he was an obvious choice for it. Maybe put Ricciardo in the Red Bull seat, keep Lawson in racing bulls for a season more or something, or potentially swap him out mid-season for Hadjar. I don't know.
Oh,
I think that's what we also
imagine.
I think no, that's a bit insane. No, I think that's what I also thought last year, or said on one of the episodes, that I thought that Ricciardo should have gotten the seat probably, but I don't think he would be doing that much right now.
It's interesting because it's not just because Ricciardo is, I think, for many a fan favorite. He has been very loved in the paddock and maybe outside of it as well. In terms of the fans, but I don't know. Like, if I look at it, right, they're putting their drivers to test in the Racing Bulls car, right?
Yeah.
Which is a lot easier to drive and seems to be on the more. If I had to put my money on it, I think it is more on the safer and understeer, way driving when you look at it. Like when you look at least last year's car, this year's car is kind of different. And it's too early to say because the car is not that developed yet. But so then you're trying to compare a complete opposite in terms of what you need a driver to, have as a skill. So that is, I don't know, like, because we have seen many, many times, these drivers performing very well in the, let's say, junior cars, of the V car, and then massively struggling in the new car. And I think for Ricciardo, it could have been absolutely the opposite, because he could have been performing not so consistently and not so well last year, particularly because he was missing the front end of the Red Bull and the confidence under the brakes, because that is actually where he makes the most time. And that was his struggle at McLaren pretty much as well. So, my opinion is genuinely that he would be much better off in the Red Bull. And at this point, like, I wonder, are we going to have 5 drivers for Red Bull this year? Because if Lawson drowns, then you put in Tsunoda, who could drown as well. I can't imagine it going so much different, but maybe it will be proved wrong. Who do you, like, if Tsunoda would fail, who do you put in the car? Do you call Checo back, or like what the hell is happening?
The thing. That is the thing as well. Because actually, you might be winning me over with this. Okay, maybe Ricciardo, maybe he's not washed. Maybe this whole time he just needed to get back into that pointy car. But I think there is a structural problem at Red Bull. It's not gonna, not right now. It's not gonna show right now. Or, I mean, it's kind of showing, right? It's kind of showing already. But they have Max Verstappen. And I think having Max Verstappen, you kind of, that's all you focus on, right? That's all you need. But Max is not gonna be there forever. Like, obviously, the team has been centered around him for years now, almost, I don't know, let's say 8 years at least. And they've been developing that car for him in this direction. He won multiple drivers' championships. They won constructors' championships. But what are you going to do, once he leaves?
Because pack your bags and go home.
Because if your strategy with the car has been, okay, let's just let's make it as pointy as possible for Max, and these other drivers, and not only in terms of the car, okay, I'm not an engineer. I don't see inside of the mind of the engineer. Maybe that's not what they're doing at all. But even just in terms of the drivers, right? You're gonna have them crash and burn next to Max Verstappen, and then you're gonna fire them. Who's gonna want to join Red Bull Racing as a replacement for Max Verstappen? I
mean, then a logical point would be to just promote your V-Carb drivers, right? So,
yeah. But then if the car is undrivable, undrivable for anybody but Max Verstappen, then
put Helmut Marko in, and he's going to show everyone how to do that.
Yeah.
And nobody can actually talk smack about Helmut Marko unless, Helmut Marko talks smack about himself. A win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
Except for Formula One.
So I'm genuinely wondering, what will be the state of Red Bull Racing in, let's say, 2029? I know it's a long time. It's a long time from now, and a bunch of things might happen before then. But even next year, with the new regulations, the new engine, and everything, are they? How hard of a crash will the fall from grace be?
That's a good question, and I think I might have a scenario for you to imagine, right? Because we well remember the Ferrari Schumacher days, or at least from YouTube videos, from different eras. Maybe we just didn't see it live. We didn't, but Ferrari. It was from 1996 when Schumacher joined Ferrari, Schumacher was building this team. And the team was built around him, because he was the clear number one driver. And he really brought Ferrari to the top. And the same question could be asked because he was a 7-time world champion. Because he won 5 championships in a row with Ferrari. And with Rubens Barrichello, a clear number 2 driver at that time, who was in a support role of Schumacher pretty much. He was the second car in Ferrari. And the same question could be asked. If Schumacher goes away, what's going to happen? And, then they swapped Barrichello for Felipe Massa, who was a young prospect of a driver. He didn't match Schumacher, I'd say. He wasn't close to Schumacher, I'd say. But then we had a certain Kimi Räikkönen, who signed for Ferrari. So the answer to your question, Tonda, is to sign another star driver who is going to lead the team forwards. And whoever it could be Oscar Piastri, could be Lando Norris, could be George Russell, even, because many speculations have been that Verstappen would sign for Mercedes because George Russell's contract is expiring at the end of the season. So you can just imagine Russell driver swap, with
Alonso.
With Verstappen, maybe Alonso as well, because he could go to Aston Martin as well, Verstappen. So the options are infinite, Tonda.
That's actually a great point and a pretty clear answer to my stupid question.
It's not a stupid question, to be honest.
Maybe they just do need another master of the pony car.
Maybe.
And I'm not sure who that might be, but we have a bunch of rookies on the grid. Kimi, Antonelli. Could another Kimi fill up the gap? Fill the void after a champion gone?
I don't think Toto Wolff is going to let...
Well, he's already doing that
Antonelli
actually
slipping
right now, right?
away. So...
And if anything, Antonelli is bound to end up at Ferrari at one point, right?
Yeah, I mean...
Being an Italian.
The stars are going to be aligned one day. Maybe after Hamilton finishes his stint at Ferrari. Yeah. He could be, again, the one replacing his seat.
Yeah. The Mercedes to Ferrari pipeline. But maybe, enough talk about 2029. That's far enough. But actually, I wanted to mention, because we were just talking about Red Bull, right? And Max Verstappen, Liam Lawson, this relationship between the teammates. But I feel like this weekend was actually an interesting show of, of more developments in the driver pairing.